All right, we're going to kick things off. So I'm really excited to be here and talk to you guys about deception technology and a better way to think about breach detection. And we need something now more than ever. I feel like this is an idea whose time has come, and this is my opportunity to hopefully educate and give you some practical ways to start using deception technology now to mitigate the impact of breaches and know in real time when these things are occurring. So first off, we need to talk about what a honey trap is. And a honey trap can be a honeypot or a honey token. And really it's just a security mechanism designed to entice adversaries to announce their presence. It's a component of a larger discipline known as deception technology, and these honey traps are designed to produce a lower volume of high-fidelity alerts, and only when you need it most, when something bad's happening. And why do we need this? We got to reduce our time to detection. It's taking way too long to know that bad things are happening, and it's resulting in catastrophe. And as you can see from some of the headlines over the past decade, millions and millions of alerts going back to Snowden with the NSA, all the way to anyone that had a security clearance, Office of Personnel Management. You know, your information was dumped and, you know, it's out there for everyone to pilfer through. Same with Equifax. I think that affect everybody here with a credit score, which is 147 million Americans. So everyone now has to do credit monitoring for life, and it's not good. And then SolarWinds really shook up our confidence in supply chain, and it took a really long time for anyone to even know that anything bad was happening, and by then it was too late. So we need something else. We need something that actually works. Oop. If there's any Jimmy McMillan fans out there, he ran his whole platform on the price of rent being high, and he's right. But the cost of cybercrime is now a big problem. Just as an assessment of last year alone, $6 trillion cost the global economy, which is wild. And by 2025, that's expected to go up to 10.5 trillion. About every 39 seconds, an organization is breached. The FBI got 847,000 cyber complaints. But I hope now that there's an actual opportunity for me to give you a solution on how we can stop the pain. Oop. So yeah, the average breach based off IBM's breach report from 2021 takes about 212 days before anyone even knows that the breach is happening, let alone the time to mitigate the breach, and that's a whole other story. And if you look back over the years at some of the biggest breaches of all time, you had Cam4. What's interesting about that is there's 10.88 billion accounts, and there's 7.3 billion people, so there are multiple accounts, because it was kind of a naughty video streaming site, so people probably didn't want others to know what was going on. Then you have Yahoo, who got breached multiple times, and 3 billion accounts. And then there's the AADHAAR, that was India's digital identity program, and probably shouldn't have done it, but at the time, the Indian government said, hey, if somebody can breach this system, I'll be surprised. The internet never disappoints, so 2 hours later, every single person had their account dumped. So don't be pompous. So let's talk about Canary and who I'm representing. I'm an authorized partner of Canary, so I don't actually work for Canary. I've just, over the years, contributed, talked to them, researched a lot of this, and they've supported me along the way. It's a company out of South Africa, Cape Town, and they're just an extraordinary group of people, and they developed this whole idea of canary in the code mine. Though it's no longer cool to use canaries since 1986, that's when British miners stopped using actual birds. We can use them all over our networks and in our code. And the way they refer to canaries is you have birds, which are traditionally honeypots, and then you have tokens. They call them canary tokens, which are honey tokens. The birds, they can be anything from a smart fridge to a dumb terminal, or a database server, a SCADA system, and they look real, and they're designed to entice bad actors to do stupid things and lead them down this path. And then you have tokens, and this is where people can start deploying these now. There's a free service from Thinks, canarytokens.org. You can generate any number of tokens, like Word documents, Slack keys, API keys from AWS. And the whole point of this is we want early warning from these canaries that a breach is happening. We want to know at the time of the breach, not 212 days later when it's too late. So I'm going to talk to you now about birds and honeypots. So the bird's the word. All right. So from the window to the Lulz. I mean, if any of you like Little John, you'll appreciate this. But let's talk about Windows, Microsoft's Active Directory. You know, Active Directory, most organizations that have been around for a while use it. You manage users, passwords, files. So it's really an attractive target. If you can compromise Active Directory, you can typically take over the entire network. So we can lure people in with a bird that acts, looks, and chirps like a domain controller. And if any of you remember the Microsoft Bimbos meme, it was a Japanese computer hardware store, and there was actually a version of Windows that came out called Microsoft Bimbos, and all it had was Notepad, sticky notes, and calculator. So from a security perspective, it had a minimal attack surface. But our bird's going to look a lot more legitimate. And for people out there that know Nmap, tried and true tool for scanning ports and doing service enumeration. So here's just the output. When I run an Nmap scan of my bird and I'm targeting certain ports that I know Windows domain controller runs on, like FTP, SSH, IIS, you can see the amount of detail and realism in the service identification. Like port 80, Microsoft Internet Information Services looks authentic. Then you get down to like port 88. It even shows you what looks to be an ostensibly legitimate domain that I'm impersonating. Thinks.com is a real site. Similarly, you get to port 389 and 636, which are common for authentication. Same deal, it says connected to domain. You'd be hard-pressed to tell the difference between this and a real domain controller. And then the beauty in this is when somebody starts targeting this domain controller, it lights up your Christmas tree. No need to do it yourself this year. But if you look on the left side, this is a collection of alerts that are generated. Not only does it aggregate the port scans, but if somebody tries to log in to your web server that's bogus, it'll actually capture the username and password, or the SQL server. So it'll help you identify how sophisticated they are and if you're being targeted. And you can also see in the bottom right, there's a lot of alerting endpoints for Canary. This is Slack particularly, but you can send emails, SMS, PagerDuty. You can create Jira tickets. It's very flexible and super powerful. But I did want to talk to you about Ted Stevens and the fact that he was right, the internet's not a big truck. He said it's a series of tubes. Not really, but it is mostly noise. And if you want to look at outside birds, which are really research honeypots, traditionally these are the ones that have been around for 20 years before things came around and found a better way to do it. You can automate contextual analysis, and you can gather IPs with this outside bird, and it doesn't alert you for every event, but it does aggregate IPs, and it's amazing how scary and weird the internet is, but you send these IPs through a service like Gray Noise, and the beauty in Gray Noise is it filters out everything other than stuff you should focus on. So if there's malicious traffic from China, it tells you it's malicious, it's known that it's a scanner or a botnet, or it's part of a content delivery network or AWS, so you don't care about that. What you really care about are the unknowns there. So this can save you countless hours for the extra curious people that want to still do traditional research and use honeypots. You can configure outside birds with Canary, which is pretty cool. And then another great integration that's built in, you can rumble and tumble through that asset jungle. Canary and Thinks go together like George Foreman and grilled chicken. And the beauty in this is you can start building a whole asset inventory from any IPs that your tokens trigger. And the point in this is you can determine, is this a known asset of mine, or is this something that's unknown? And if something you don't have is triggering alerts. There's potential it could be compromised. So you could then throw that in the gray noise and correlate it. And it's super cool. If you guys know HD Moore, Metasploit, this is his company, and incredibly powerful tool written in Go, so it's super fast and free. I highly recommend it. It's tokens all the way down. Now that we've talked about birds and honeypots, I'm going to talk to you about tokens and all the cool things you can do with them. If there's any Chris Farley Black Sheep fans out there, this is a scene from that. I love that movie, rest in peace. But we're going to talk about some reconnaissance and enumeration tokens first. So DNS, domain name system, for those that don't know, when you type in Google or RVAsec, behind the scenes it's translating all of that to internet protocol addresses. You don't need to know how to route traffic. You just need to know how to find whatever you need to on the internet. Well, we can use these DNS Canary tokens to create fictitious domain names and map these to what are called dark network segments. These are networks created specifically for no reason at all, except for this probably. And there's nothing on there. The whole point in this is somebody tries to enumerate these unused segments, it'll resolve to these fake domain names and then start to fire an alert. So it's pretty slick. And one thing I wanted to point out in the bottom left, when you do a query, you get the canarytokens.com, which is like pretty obvious. If you actually like subscribe to their service, you can customize the domain to be your own domain, so it blends in. It could be, I think it's like docs.rvasec.com. So it wouldn't be evident immediately that they're being duped. But even with DNS, one thing to point out for the technical people is like, you're only going to get the IP address of the DNS server that resolved it, not the IP of the user. But even with that, it was able to determine this was originating in Richmond, Virginia from Cloudflare. I used the 1002 DNS server. And so that's great for initial reconnaissance and people that might be inside your network. And if we continue along the path of DNS, we can use this thing called web redirect tokens for all those nosy O'Donnells out there that are trying to poke around and figure out what's happening on these subdomains. What's really neat about this is you grab a ton of information really quickly. So they'll hit the token in less than a second. It'll flash by and redirect them to the actual site. So for an example, I have this domain thinks.io that I transferred to Thinks, and it quickly flashes, sends you the Canary tokens, then you end up in RVAsec. The map on the bottom left is really helpful too, because it'll show you geographically where all these IPs originating are from. So you can correlate, maybe there's some larger threat campaign, or maybe there's something going on here rather than just random traffic. And it also allows you to filter out like known search bots and crawlers and things like that. And if you look at the right at some of the information and why this is important, we want to, in this process, start building a forensics trail. And this is where it'll culminate. Based off all this information that you're gathering, you can, with a high degree of certainty, de-anonymize most people, because there's only so many people in Richmond that run Windows and Firefox. Tons of places gather this information, like Valve's Steam service and their hardware survey. So if you need to do investigations, this will help the cause with either a third-party company or the FBI. It even tells you the version of Windows, the JavaScript or the MIME types, like lots of good information just from this one token, and they haven't even been inside yet. All right, and there's also a really interesting token, if there's any dodgeball fans out there. The purpose of this token is to determine if somebody has cloned your website, and it happens all the time. But how would you know? And it's okay. There's tons of free tools to do this, like HTTrack, and you can clone the site locally or whatever. But if somebody clones Thinks.com and deploys it on this bogus domain Thinks.io, you probably want to know about it, because this has been helpful for actually sending cease and desist letters to get these domains taken down. So I've seen this be highly effective. And all you have to do is create the token. It gives you like 5 lines of code that you can embed on your HTML pages. And when you do it, it fires an alert. Same deal, you get your alert in your console, Slack, any number of endpoints. Super cool, helpful token. APIs, if you don't know what it means, is alert, protect, investigate. Just ask Burt Macklin. But for real, this is API tokens, and let's talk about a few of those and what you can do. Any Borat fans out there? Hopefully you appreciate this. But AWS, Amazon Web Services, this is a great token because everybody wants an AWS key. If you're a pen tester, a bad guy, a red teamer, you want AWS. If you find a set of keys, you're going to be hard-pressed to not try and use them. Well, you can drop these tokens like on every company laptop. There's a pretty simple script I wrote that's on the Canary utils site for Jamf, one of the endpoint management system, and it'll just go and create a unique memo for the user and tell you like where this token's at. That's one important thing to note. Make sure you use good descriptions because you might end up issuing thousands of tokens, and if it just says token fired, it's not going to be helpful. So make sure you use like a meaningful description. And what's really cool as well, so you get the geographic information. Again, you can start correlating where this may be happening and if there's a trend here. But it also tells you the command that was run. And so you can start to figure out the level of sophistication. Like if somebody gets a set of keys, what are they going to do first? They're probably going to run caller identity. They might list some buckets. But again, you're building this kind of forensics trail, and they don't even know it. This is part of your threat hunting appeal built in. And if we continue along the AWS route, there's another good bang for the bucket. There is an AWS simple storage service bucket token. And S3 over the years has been pwned multiple times because people would accidentally like put sensitive information on buckets that were exposed to the world and all of that. So I don't recommend creating a bucket that's world readable. But the best use case for this is in your network because you can create a bucket like Etna, BAA, PHI, or something that blends into your naming scheme. And just the mere act of listing the buckets will fire an alert. So it's almost impossible to not trip over this token. And you can even issue a fake set of AWS keys and then create a fake bucket in that account. And so you get double alerting. And you can see from the alert on the right, not only are you getting the IP address, you're getting the type of request, the user that made the request, and you're getting the user agent, which has all kinds of good information. So this was actually run with the Bodo 3 SDK on Linux, and you can tell kind of from the bottom. I mean, there's a couple methods that I use to access it, but really where it says AWS SDK Java Linux, that's where it tells you what's going on there. And then this is just a fun slide I had. I had a good time with this. If anyone remembers Exhibit's Pimp My Ride, you can apply his logic to Slack or AWS, and you can get super meta, do things like drop Slack tokens in your Slack space. So by the time they realize they've been duped, they're going to have to go back to MySpace. Stone Cold Steve Austin is going to give you a stunner. No, but you can drop these also in your code repositories, on people's laptops. Anyone that's in Slack that's reading public channels, all they have to do is search for XOXP or XOXP, which is a bot token. They're going to find this juicy nugget, and they're going to try and use it. It doesn't have any permissions, but yeah, they're going to get stunned. And kind of the last API token, as an example, is Kubernetes token. And Kubernetes is a Google invention, and it's K8 is what people refer to it. It's just K, 8 letters, S, pretty cool. And the whole point of Kubernetes, without getting into too much detail, it's a way to manage like thousands and thousands of applications and orchestrate activity quickly, and it's a whole big, wonderful mess, but it's lovely. And this is going to bring the bums to the jar. And if you start to similarly apply this logic and write a script to deploy like a Kubernetes token on everyone's machine, it'll tell you, okay, what's the endpoint they hit in Kubernetes/API? Also, what's the user agent? So if they're stupid and keep running all these tokens on their own machine, you're going to gather more and more information forensically that's going to help you as you start to layer these tokens together. All right, well, let's talk about some device-specific tokens. And these are ones that everyone here can apply right now, and I recommend you do for a couple of reasons. So first off, you've got this WireGuard token. WireGuard's like a new, faster version of OpenVPN. It's used by a lot of companies commercially and otherwise. And what you can do with this token is you can create a VPN profile, and you can call it RVAsec private VPN or something attractive. The idea here is if your phone gets compromised, and it happens a lot, if you look at last year with NSO Group and the Pegasus spyware, it was super insidious because the only way you'd know if your phone was compromised is if you did forensics. So this is like a quick mechanism to detect, like, okay, somebody's pwned my iPhone. And it's pretty simple. You scan the QR code. Somebody enables it, fires a Slack alert, tells you everything you need to know, and you should probably burn it. Go get yourself a Motorola flip phone or something that is dumb, because this isn't good. And you should scan this QR code, because if you'd like to, or you don't need to, but it's legitimate. And QR codes really, they go back a long time, but they certainly took off during the pandemic, with things like Toast. And so people just love scanning QR codes. But the whole idea here and where this can be useful is you can drop some emails unread that are hidden from all your employees with some headline like multi-factor device enrollment code, bogus code, but when they scan it, similarly, it'll fire an alert. And, then you're going to know someone's up to no good. You could also print this out and put new Wi-Fi password. But you probably don't push out you probably push out your Wi-Fi securely, like with Intune or Jamp if you're doing it right. And so the only people that are going to think you have a new Wi-Fi password are the punks that are inside trying to get access. So there's a lot of different use cases, and this is just one. Okay, and this is where it gets fun, and it's a bit trippy. But this is the part of the tokens where it's all about information warfare and really messing with the adversaries, because if they've gotten to this point, it's time to just mess with them and kind of give them the sense that you're onto them and it's time to get out. So we can start with this, databases. Get it? The data basically is asking to be dumped, but you can create a token, like a MySQL token, call it something cool like NFT payments table or, credit card backup, something that looks legitimate, and just fill it with gibberish, or actually it does it for you, but you can insert any number of things that look real, and somebody accesses it, starts trying to run database commands or just imports the database, you're going to get an alert. Similarly, you'll get your email, however number of endpoints you want. And the one thing I'll say about Canary that I didn't mention earlier is the whole point is to have a low volume of these alerts. And so you don't necessarily want to be sending emails or Slacks for everything, but you can designate specific tokens of high value and only send those to PagerDuty, right? Because that's the intent of PagerDuty, is like something bad's going off, send an alert to the pager. But other ones, like when you're doing the reconnaissance stuff, you're going to get a lot of people that are trying to hit your domain. I think when I deployed things.io, there were 114 hits an hour roughly of people that just thought this was legitimate. So there's a lot of alerts. So you can set up your alerts accordingly. Canary has this thing called flocks and so on and so forth. What if I told you conspiracy theories or conspiracy realities? Well, if conspiracy Keanu happens to be mucking around, he's going to see something that looks quite tantalizing, like executive compensation plan or go-to-market strategy, and you can use this as an opportunity to educate and terrorize. But you can drop something in there about Operation Northwoods, right, where the government was considering attacking U.S. cities to galvanize support for invading Cuba, or HARP, where allegedly the weather's being controlled by, the Navy or whatever, or MK Ultra, which was fascinating and kind of surreal, but yeah, it happened. So at this point, they're probably going to be freaking out and being like, what's going on? And they'll probably go the other way. And if not, there's a really cool service called BitTrap, and they just launched, and what they do is they pay out bug bounties, in different amounts as you get further and further in the network. So at this point, maybe you open the document and you're like, hey, you're here, we know you're here. If you leave now, we'll give you $1,000. If you stay, you should be aware of these potential consequences. So it's a really neat concept, and they just partnered with Thinks, and it's brilliant. And I'm obsessed with DB Cooper because nobody knows what really happened. And, this whole, spread some bullshits. The whole point here is, like, again, make something that sounds attractive, like Project DB Cooper, NFT financial prospectus, whatever that means. Somebody opens it, you could drop all kinds of gibberish. You can make it look as authentic as you want. In this case, I just kind of grabbed some information. The FBI sadly closed this case, and I asked our FBI friends last night what the situation is, and they said they get that question a lot, and there's no other information. But maybe this adversary opens this thing and goes on a wild tangent and leaves your network. I mean, either way, you're going to confuse and send them down a different path, and that's the whole point, is to get them to leave. And then all of this culminates in what I call deception inception for better breach detection. And I want to walk you through one example of how you can layer all these different tokens together, and in the process, forensically gather so much information that you send to your SIEM, your Security Incident and Event Management System, or Liam Neeson, who isn't going to mess around. And the way that it works, you've got an adversary, like whoever, they pop your server, right? And so let's say it's running Nginx, which is pretty common. Well, you can do something cool with DNS tokens. You can create a process token such that if they hop on the server and they run ls to list the contents, it'll fire an alert. Or even if they SSH into the system, like the DNS token is very extensible and customizable, and there's so much that you can do with it beyond just enumeration. And so at that point, or maybe you just wrap the Nmap process in a token, and that will work. Well, the first time they hit a token, starts to send forensic data to the SIM, then they're going to run Nmap, like I showed you on slide 7. And the moment they run Nmap, they're probably going to hit a bunch of systems. One of them is going to blend in, and they're going to hit it, because how can you not? If you're doing situational awareness when you first get into a network, you'd be hard-pressed to not want to run this and see what's going on. And then maybe we can lead them down a path and say, oh, here's a Windows file server, right? That just has all kinds of goodies in it. Stuff about, again, executive plans or organizational charts. Or maybe someone was silly, because this has happened, and they left some plain text credentials on there, like some AWS keys. Well, that's convenient, right? Or a Kubernetes token. You can see where this is going. So they open this document, they find this gold mine, like an AWS, then they list buckets. Whoops, mistake. And they hit a bucket that's also token. So you've got 6 layers of forensics, and you can have even more. Like, the way that this really works, because I get this question a lot, is how do you, or I hear this statement, adversaries are bad guys that know what they're doing. They're going to know to avoid this. And there may be something that stands out, and they'll say, well, this looks suspicious, it doesn't seem legit. But if you put enough of these together and you layer them, it almost becomes impossible to not trip over something, like a landmine. If you drop AWS keys everywhere within your normal AWS keys, and let's just say you were silly and you push them to GitHub, and they're publicly available, you'll have some legitimate ones, and you'll have some non-legitimate ones. And of course you don't want secrets in source code, but let's just say that you already have them. Well, what a great transition plan to also drop bogus ones in to see if somebody's already been in your network, maybe poking around using these keys. So there's a lot of opportunity, and the whole point in this is like token. Thinks has said that there are customers that have minted over millions of tokens, and they let you mint as many as you want on their site, or if you subscribe, same deal. So you may as well do it. And there's a lot of creative, smart people out here, and what makes this whole thing fun is that it really taps in to your creativity, as well as your logical ability. And if you can think of it, you can achieve it. There's so much possibility. There's been some tokens that I actually sent them that kind of got worked into their platform, right? So one of the things I wanted was Kubernetes, and I worked with them through the beta on the containerized bird, and then it ended up being part of the token. Their latest token is the Kubernetes token, which is super helpful because if you're cloud native, you run Kubernetes more than likely. And so all this said, once it ends up with Liam Neeson, he may not know who you are right at that moment, but he's got enough information to, if he can't de-anonymize you, he can pass it on to someone that will. And that is really, really, really great, because how else are you going to find needles in a haystack or a hay farm, which is really what the problem is. We got alert fatigue that's causing burnout of employees and people to leave the industry, and the bad guys keep winning, And this is why we need something different. And I truly believe that this can be useful for everyone here. I've seen companies not be catastrophically breached because of this. I've seen elite pen test firms that trip after 8 minutes because they think they have a gold mine and they found the Slack token. And so you could start to mess with them. And this is kind of what we need to kind of get the upper hand against adversaries. And with that, I want to thank everyone for your time and wanted to open up for questions. Bueller, anyone there? Hey, Michael. Man, I watched that HBO show. I'm not sure. At least 7 people think he's still alive. I think my friend is DB Cooper, but that's a whole other thing. I don't know, honestly. I think his plan, though, it was foiled by he just improperly tied his harness, and he asked for $200,000, and I don't think he landed with any of it if he's still around. But it's a good question. We'll have to ask FBI agents. Yes. It's a good question. If you couldn't hear, he asked, in new environments, this is great, greenfield, but what about live ones? So one example I kind of gave is maybe you have source codes or secrets in GitHub, or you're already using AWS keys improperly and you're storing them locally on people's machines. Well, you know that you want a plan to not do that, but in the interim, you'd like to know if people are rummaging around. So you can add illegitimate keys to legitimate ones and have it all kind of blend in. And so that'll tell you people do indeed have access and they're mucking around, and that'll give you time to sort of transition, but also highlight where they might be targeting, And so, people don't always do things the right way. There's a lot of technical and security debt that accumulates over time, but these tokens, can just be deployed normally like anything else you do, and they'll let you know amidst the noise, if things are happening, because it's even harder in a well-established environment to have solid monitoring and more signal to noise. So this kind of adds signal amidst the noise. Great question. Anyone else? Yeah. That's a great question. How do you talk to leadership about tokens but not introduce risk? Well, the first rule of deception technologies, you don't talk about deception technology, right? So you don't want to let bad guys know, because then they may actually be more careful. So it is something that really should be need to know, and it should be done in a way that is subtle and not obvious, right? So a lot of endpoint software, it affects the user. There's some performance hit, there's something, and it becomes evident to people that aren't in the security team that, their machine's being messed with. But if you can kind of pitch it to them that this will blend in like normal activity, there's very low impact to the user, and there's a lot of benefit, usually it's well received, Like these tokens are a couple kilobytes in size, like they're very lightweight, and they don't have a huge impact. But absolutely, you don't want to tell people that bad guys are coming. Some people will put up an ADT sign out front of their house and think it deters criminals. In reality, probably tells them that you have something valuable to protect. So unless you have ADT, I don't really recommend putting up a sign. That's just my thought, but thanks for the question. Yes? Yeah, that's a good question. They actually have a binary EXE token on their site, and the way it works is it'll replace the actual binary, or like on the Linux case, you can have it be like a symlink to like a script. So like you can name it, let's say LS, right? Well, LS, when they type it, they think they're typing LS, but in reality it's pointing to LS that actually has the Canary code, which is like a few lines, and all it does is it says, here's the command, but in the command it hits the DNS token, and when the DNS token's hit, that's when the alert fires. So it does its normal command, hits the DNS endpoint, and it still functions. It's not like the binary's broken or like the program just stops working, but when you create the token, they make it as ostensibly realistic as possible. And on the Windows side, I don't know the exact details, but I think in the executable they actually inject like the token, on top of like the binary. So they take what you have, they copy it, and they add that little bit of metadata, and it's pretty brilliant, And they don't have an official Linux binary token, but like I said, you can wrap DNS tokens, and there's a GitHub project called Yellow Taxi, I think, where somebody wrote it in C and made it more easier to distribute. But yeah, thanks for the question. Anyone else? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's, I've run into this situation. You talk to developers, or the one developer that's going to review your, pull requests and know what's happening, or like the security champions in your company, if you have that set up, on the business units, you tell them, hey, we're doing this thing, make it look like a normal pull request or a commit, maybe go back in time if you're in this bad situation where you've accidentally pushed, secrets of source code, and look at what that said, and then do the same thing. But you can also just, have a pull request that says, we're upgrading the Jenkins build server or something, and in that it adds some keys, or we're adding chef scripts or Terraform or what have you, and then you just happen, maybe, you just happen to drop some tokens in there in the .aws directory. But yeah, you have to communicate with the right people, and of course, I don't recommend, creating like a Jira ticket or a GitHub ticket that says, put in Canary token in source code, like, don't be silly. Just find a way to communicate, maybe use code words, like, adding new keys to the kingdom, something. But yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. Who else? It's just my email address. I'm a ghost, but yeah, it's on the front slide. Send me an email anytime. I don't really do the social network thing. Maybe I should, but yeah, love to stay in touch. Love to talk about this or anything else. Relatively new concept. Even just talking to security practitioners, a lot of people like haven't really considered this, and I think it's really starting to take off. Like 2021 seemed to be the year of deception technology, and for good reason. And so I expect things to continue to flourish, and yeah, love to keep in touch and talk more about it. So hit me up. If there's nothing else, just wanted to thank you all again. Appreciate you.